welcome to the Total Soccer Show World Cup Daily. We were dealt the biggest shock of the tournament so far when Jonathan Tah hit it over the bar. Paraguay will be celebrating for days as Germany somehow failed at PKs. Wow. Japan were great but failed at their endeavour when they lost to the least entertaining Brazil side ever. And we had another shootout in which Morocco were clutch as they scored one more than the Dutch. My name's Ryan Bailey. Let's say hello to Taylor Rockwell, everybody. Hi, Taylor.
Hi, Ryan. A good intro as always, but I am interested. You think that's the worst Brazil side?
Least entertaining, not necessarily worse. I don't think they've got the flair of years gone by. Is that fair?
Interesting. I look forward to discussing and hearing more about your hard and firm opinions on the Brazilian attack.
I am just psyching myself up because we're on the same side as the bracket as them, Taylor. That's it.
I see.
That's it.
Look at it. Look, that's vague positivity for England. That's a new one.
We learned this word, manifesting. We're doing it. We're doing it, Taylor.
I love you referring to yourself as we, but okay. Otherwise, I agree.
Royal we. Yeah. Okay. Joe Larry, hi. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing all right. I finally caught the Alhambra illness, so I suppose I have been better, though I'm going to soldier on like a brave boy that I am. I learned that apparently the way that Ryan does his rhyming introductions is that Taylor just texts him the rhymes live as we're going. I assume, Taylor, that's how you started off the show. It's a good system you guys have worked on, and I think it's nice to see it working at full capacity.
It can be quite a strain when we're doing it live, Joe, but yeah.
We'll do it live.
It works. It works indeed. Graham Ruthven also here. Hi, Graham. How's it going for you?
Good. Yesterday was a good day of games. Was it the best day of the World Cup so far? Those three games.
Felt like the longest.
And I like how FIFA rope-a-doped us into a false sense of security with the round of 32 where, first day of the knockout rounds, they're like, oh, here's Canada, South Africa to ease you into things, and then pow! 3 bangers the following day. Yeah.
Pow! Pow! Pow!
Are you saying pow?
I got that reference. Can I make a proposal? Here's my proposal. I think that for all subsequent World Cups, there should be one day off between the end of the group stage and the start of the knockout rounds. We could have just moved Canada, South Africa to the next day. Or at the very least, that game has to be in the evening of the first day of the knockouts because I think that the World Cup is missing out on brackets. I really do. I've been doing a bracket pool with some of my friends, and my wife is very into it, and I think this would be a way to get other people who don't usually watch these games to invest. And I feel like that's a missed opportunity because there's no window to do brackets. Graham,
okay, talking point, right? Nate Silver, yes, he's still a thing apparently, he tweeted that there should be a break of 3 days between the end of the group stage and the beginning of the knockout rounds for people to fill out their brackets, right? And there's been a lot of talk about what the European mind can't comprehend at this tournament. This is one of these things. Surely that takes 5 minutes, Joe.
Yeah.
Why do you need a day to do it?
Day to get the bracket set, and I think if part of this is getting the casuals on board, it takes a little bit of time to communicate and get them up to speed. So I don't know, a day, or I left it open for a morning and an afternoon, and you have the game in the evening. I just felt like if there had been a little bit more of a delay of even hours more between the end of the group stage and the start of the knockouts, that would have been perfect for the bracket. 3 days is absurd. I had not seen that.
Also sleep. That would be the main reason I would like a day between.
We'll allow it.
The Canada-South Africa game was kind of a little sojourn, just the one day, just the one game that day. Did we get enough time for you to fill out some names on a bracket?
No.
That day? No? Fine.
I mean, I did, but I feel like we could have gotten more people on board.
Fair enough.
I do hear where Joe's coming from.
Thanks, Taylor.
If you are doing bracketology, generally speaking, like, Graham, don't you run a fantasy app? I feel like the whole thing with fantasy commissioners is having to chase everyone up to get on the same page and get their forms in and get everything scheduled. And even with, like, March Madness, my brother-in-law always sets up our, like, family one. And you can send me that thing, like, a week in advance, and it's always going to be the morning of after a good, like, reminder. So I feel like you do need that window, because with this one, by the time you sent that reminder, a game has already been played, and you kind of can't have a complete bracket then.
So this is predictions from other people. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, right. I thought it was like a wall chart. Like, people just want to fill out their wall chart. And I was like, 3 days.
You thought everybody's having a hard time drawing lines?
Like, this
might one end or
can't
two
do
ends.
it.
This might be a cultural thing. I don't think bracket predictions exist over here. But now I have a little bit more understanding of what you're talking about.
It's great. Anyway, we should do that. FIFA, my consulting check is in the mail, presumably. Great. Sounds good.
Wow. Well done. Job well done, Joe. I like that very much. Tell you what else is a job well done. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. That's where you'll get our bonus content. We put on there bonus episodes, video content and access to our Discord server where all the cool kids are hanging out. They're also counting our very specific predictions that we did in the previews of this tournament. Don't check it, but I'm pretty sure I'm winning. So yeah, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show for all our bonus content. Let's get to last night's game, which I felt very brave staying up past midnight to watch the shootout for, but it was a lot of fun. Netherlands won, Morocco won. Morocco winning 3-2 on penalties. Cody Gakpo's breakthrough was cancelled out by Issa Diop in injury time. That was a lovely moment. And then the Dutch missing 3 spot kicks before Ismail Sabari sealing it 3-2 on penalties for Morocco. Taylor, you are, I think, our Morocco stan. I think it's safe to say, certainly since 2022. They dominated a lot of this game. Well earned, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it wasn't even like the best Moroccan performance we've seen over the last 2 World Cups, but I thought it was comprehensively very strong. And as the game went on, they grew into it. The Dutch did the opposite. Zlatan, there have been plenty of clips of that, very, very frustrated with this Dutch team and their approach. I thought about this for a while this morning. I don't think I can think of another one. I don't think I've ever seen a European team play another team that like wasn't European and wasn't Brazil or Argentina and look this like we know we're not the best team here. The entire Dutch approach was we are going to be the reactive team who are going to let our opponents control the game. And sometimes that can be a tactical choice if we're going to absorb pressure and then hit on the break and then we're going to have periods of possession. This felt entirely like we think they might be better and might have more talent across the board. So we are going to set up to defend that talent as best we can. And I think that goes some way towards explaining why they do go with the back 3 defensively here, but then still have Van de Ven as your left back. So then you've got Nathan Ake and Van de Ven, I would assume, likely to deal with the right side of Morocco, specifically Achraf Hakimi. And I assume then that there was an idea of like, and we'll get Denzel Dumfries in isolation on the right, and we'll be able to capitalize on him, and we'll have Gakpo in isolation, and we'll find some level of attacking flair. But they really didn't. And Dumfries and Gakpo were largely anonymous in the first half, and not that Morocco were like comprehensively better in that first period, but in the second, they definitely were. And Stu Holden said it as we went to the hydration break. I think Morocco had something like 79% of possession since halftime, and they did seem like the team that were really going for it, that were committing numbers into the attack, that were trying to find ways through, and the Dutch just seemed very reactive before the goal, and then after scoring, certainly, all the way through penalties. And I think I was pulling a little bit for this Dutch team. I thought they had found some form and figured some things out, but I think Morocco, the deserved winners on the day for me.
Yeah, I was the same, Taylor. It was so disappointing to see the Netherlands go out like this because I really thought they'd hit upon something in those games against Sweden and Tunisia, while accounting for those 2 teams, particularly Tunisia being a poor standard of opposition. I just really liked what I saw from the Netherlands in those games, particularly the Sweden game, where that's a team that's made the knockout rounds of this competition. They have a certain standard, and the Netherlands in those 2 games, they were so quick into the attack. They brought in Brian Brobby from the first game, and that got, not only was he a physical focal point and a threat in his own right, but he brought players into the game around him, and I thought the midfield was well balanced. I remember we talked about that, Taylor, that game against Sweden, Taylor, where things just clicked for them. All of a sudden, the spacing in midfield was really good. They had the wingers high and wide with Gakpo on one side and either Somerville or Malen. They kind of rotated between those options in the group stage on the other side. And for Coleman to throw all of that in the bin and go with the back 3, which they hadn't used before, and you're absolutely right, Taylor, I'd imagine it was primarily designed to combat Hakimi down the right side, and in particular put Van de Ven and his speed up against him. And I thought that worked to a certain extent, at least in terms of stopping Hakimi as an individual. I still thought Morocco's rotations in that right side were really, really impressive. But it just resulted in a really disjointed and conservative and passive Dutch performance, and they conceded so much control to Morocco that I know Morocco scored late on to equalise, but it just felt like they were going to find a way through at some point, and ultimately they did, and it cost the Netherlands.
It feels a little bit like what we've talked about previously at this tournament with Scotland, where like going in, Graham was very like a little bit, you could say pragmatic, you could say gloom and doom, but then Scotland play the way they do, and it's sort of like, oh, like here it is. It's exactly what Graham thought it was going to be, and it's happened. This for me was like every frustration I've ever heard about Ronald Koeman just on full display.
Yep.
That like it felt like, okay, like to Graham's point, like it's a more attacking team. They figured some things out. They've got some good goals. They've got some good playmakers. They've got a strong midfield. They've got a good defense. Maybe this could be it. And then just to see Koeman be like, nope, defensive, like all creativity lost. It was just a crazy moment of like, oh, this is why Barcelona supporters were so annoyed. This is why Dutch supporters have been annoyed previously. And Everton supporters, I think, maybe as well. Like, it's just been a strange period of time when I thought this Dutch team were going to kind of elevate and find a new gear, and instead to see them just be ultra defensive and in a 5-4-1 block for huge stretches of this game was definitely a bummer from what we've seen previously.
Yeah. Joe, was this actually a shock result? Or is it to be expected, do we think?
I'm not shocked. I don't think anybody who's watched any of this World Cup should be shocked. I mean, you could be marginally surprised. I texted with a Dutch friend of mine about, sort of how he was feeling ahead of this game, and he said 55% likely that we're going to win, 45 for Morocco. Sure, that seems reasonably fair, somewhere in that range. To go back to the bracket, I did pick Morocco to win this game, so I was not surprised to see them go on and advance through this. This is a really good Morocco team, and I don't think they played particularly well, so maybe that's where Taylor and I disagree slightly. I know, Taylor, you weren't exactly heaping praise on them by any means, but I don't think Morocco created a lot of chances. I don't think that they really imposed themselves in this game in basically any way. I thought for as conservative as the Dutch were, and they really were, with 4 center backs on the field, I thought Morocco were quite conservative in a lot of their possession play, where they were, for a lot of the game, keeping even 4 or 5 players beneath the Dutch 5-4-1 block that, Taylor, you were just talking about. They had oftentimes a back 3 and then at least 1, if not 2 midfielders or even a wide player dropping back below the striker, whether it's Brobby or later Weghorst. And that took so many numbers out of the block itself, where you want to penetrate or run in behind or break between the lines. And Morocco, I think, were just so conservative as well, in their own very different way, and in a less conservative way still than the Dutch. But they got the job done, man. This team had just enough quality. They get the late moment, and that's a beautiful goal. Although I will admit, even though I wanted Morocco to win for my bracket's sake, the Cody Gakpo goal kind of got me. I think it got everybody, and that is, I think, my favorite moment of the tournament. He and his partner losing their unborn son, and you could just see the emotion after that goal. I don't think there'll be a moment at this tournament for me that tops that. It's a really, really horrible, difficult moment in a lot of ways, and to see the love that was poured out there is really special. And now to see also you have all these people talking now and sharing similar stories and the outpouring of support for them, I think has been really beautiful. So I was sort of finding myself, and I think a lot of people probably were pulling for the Dutch, but I don't think anybody can really argue that Morocco did enough to reasonably win this game.
Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to ask, with how they do end up conceding, Morocco, where it is that sort of like ball long flicked on counterattack, like, so obviously it doesn't work fully keeping everybody back, but what would you have liked to see them do to be more adventurous? Because I can understand because I can understand they're like 5-4-1, we're going to have to commit a lot of numbers, we're going to have to try a lot of stuff, but also that's the kind of the trap there, right? You overcommit numbers, you overcommit in terms of how you're trying to attack and who's carrying the ball forward, and then you're caught out, and now you're caught on the break, and now you're 1-0 down, and now the bunker's even more effective. What is a way to sort of keep that stability but have more variety in the attack for you?
I think Morocco just could have pulled fewer numbers back beneath the block and could have left more in between the lines to then give them the opportunities to run in behind or to break lines. I just thought it was quite stagnant for Morocco in a lot of their possession play, and I think a lot of that was self-imposed. And it's difficult, right? You commit too many numbers forward, like you're saying, Taylor, then you leave yourself vulnerable going the other way. It's just that the Netherlands weren't creating chances. They created nothing, the Netherlands, in open play in this game. Nothing. I mean, the goal is brilliant, and that is an open play. It's classic Graham Ruthven, Route 1, big lad football, with a bit of class at the end from Somerville. That assist is unbelievable, and the finish from Gakpo is great as well. But really, the Dutch were no threat in this game at any point in the game, other than that moment. So Morocco, I think, had lots of time to go out there and impose themselves a little bit more, and they didn't, and I think they're a little fortunate that didn't bite them, but still a great win for them, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I think this result will give them quite a bit of confidence going forward. I don't just mean the fact that they won, I mean the fact that the game state was majorly against them here after conceding to go 1-0 down. And I think it's a sign of how, and I hear everything you're saying, Joe, and I agree with it to a certain extent. I think I was maybe slightly warmer on Morocco's performance, and I think the way they get through this game, it's proof to me that they might be even better than the 2022 team. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to make the semi-finals because of the way that draws work, and that 2022 team was quite lucky in the way they got through penalty shootouts and so on. But I don't think they win this game in 2022 because Morocco never fell behind in that run to the semi-finals. They were always able to have the game state in their favour, and here they are able to bounce back, and now they are able to control games against high caliber opponents in the opposition half. And obviously a lot of that is on the way that the Dutch set up in this match, but Morocco have players like Boadi and El Anoui and Brahim Diaz, who they didn't have those sort of technicians before. And so I look at the way that they're able to adapt to certain situations, and they're still not a team that's going to tear you apart in sort of attacking sequences or possession sequences. But I see a team that's slightly more adaptable than the one that was 3.5 years ago, and I feel pretty good about their chances of making another serious run at this tournament.
I mean, looking at extra time alone, and Stu Holden doing the commentary or the color commentary did a good job of breaking this down. But the Dutch had nothing really in terms of a threat going forward in extra time, extra time, because the way Morocco committed numbers, they basically pinned everybody back, and the people that were meant to be your kind of speedy outlets, like Somerville when he's sort of on his game. I wasn't as impressed with him in this game, but he's pinned back trying to help with the overload on the left, and then you have on the other side you've got everybody trying to deal with Hakimi, and it just felt like the entire Dutch defense was kind of collapsed and spread and not able to do anything. So even when they could win the ball back, it was basically try to find Weghorst and hope he can draw a foul, and then we can maybe get a set piece and get some numbers forward and see what we can do with that. But the way Morocco were able to commit numbers to the attack after equalizing, it's not like they were chasing at that point, but they were, I think, going for a winner and trying to make something happen in that period of extra time, and I don't think you could say the same for the Dutch.
I mean, there's that huge Rahimi chance in extra time, which according to FOTMOB was 0.74. It's an incredible save it's one of the saves of the tournament from Verbruggen. But
it's one of the best saves I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Verbruggen had a very strange game, didn't he? Where there were some great saves and then he kicks one into his own net in a penalty shootout. But
harsh.
Yeah, I can't really argue with the stronger team going through. I thought that was Morocco.
Taylor, speaking of the penalty shootout, this was you had a couple of opportunities to do your famous penalty shootout diagrams in your notes. 5 misses in this shootout in particular. It was an interesting one, wasn't it?
Yeah. Very interesting. I think Bono deserves so much credit, the Moroccan goalkeeper, because he
moved in mysterious ways. I thought when he was going sort of laterally along the line, definitely.
That's good work by you, man.
Thanks.
That's just quality work. And he did, and he moved in confounding ways. It seemed for a few of the Dutch takers who I think were trying to do the I'm going to look you down and then go a different way, and I think he got into their head a little bit. Kluivert is the most notable one, where you can see him almost in the middle of his run-up be like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And I think he hits it off the post as a result. And that was with Bono, I think, standing still. But the way he moved around, I think he just made it seem like he was going to dive. So then Kluivert overcorrected, opened his hips up, or got his hips too much around it and put it off the post. But Bono did such a good job with his positioning and movement, and then obviously getting a really strong hand to the Somerville penalty at the end, where he's able to kind of keep that out with the one-hand save while staying up. I thought he was excellent in this one, and I thought Morocco were just pretty reliably strong, with the exception of the 2 misses they had. I couldn't believe Hakimi missed, and I couldn't believe that he did, I think, the exact same thing that maybe Timber did with his miss, where he hit it off the post and overcorrected, and then Hakimi stepped up and did the same. But I love that it was Saibari with the win in the end. And I really liked that Kempstein, I'm sure that's not how you say his name, Talbi, subbed on, got the penalty in this one, and got an assist, which was my very specific prediction. Thank you very much. Because he had never gotten an assist for Morocco. I think he only had 1 playing for Sunderland this season, in a sort of breakthrough season for him. And my idea was that the Premier League is a hard animal to kind of break through and find a lot of success with, but having a good first season is a good way to start. And I thought he would come into this Morocco team who might need more invention and more service late in games in this tournament, and he might be able to provide something. And here he did. So it does feel like it gives Morocco another sort of tool for the tool belt, and one that can provide inch perfect crosses in moments of need is probably not the worst thing to have. But overall, I think it came down to the 2 goalkeepers. Bono with some really good performances. I feel so bad for Verbruggen. As Graham mentioned, he has The opening, does he make the opening save? No, it's yes, he does. He goes the wrong way. It's just a miss. But then when he goes for the second one and it just pops underneath him and then bounces off the heel as he's diving and it slowly rolls in. I feel like we see those in like highlight clips or low light clips of like most unfortunate penalty ever.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen that in real time.
I haven't seen that.
It kind of blew my mind.
I haven't seen that before, and I was kind of being I was talking in jest, sort of blaming Verbruggen. He knows nothing about it, but he actually does like kick out a leg. It doesn't sort of just bounce off his leg. He moves his leg and kicks
Was
it
it in
into
an
his
unnatural
own
position? Do we need to review this? Or?
No, please no. We'll get onto VAR later. But yeah, I've never seen that before.
Good stuff. All right, well, Morocco will face Canada on July 4th in Houston. I'm not sure how the Canucks will feel about that one, because that's quite a robust opponent they have now.
I'm guessing they enjoyed this going to extra time and penalties and it being a physically demanding game from start to finish. Maybe Morocco have slightly more tired legs than they would have otherwise.
This is very true. All right, well, I'll tell you who's going to have nice rested legs for the rest of the summer. That's Germany. We're going to get to them later on in this episode. And, of course, Brazil's win over Japan. Taking a quick break. Join us in a sec. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to World Cup Daily. Let's go to Boston, where Germany had a 1-1 draw with Paraguay. Paraguay winning 4-3 on penalties. Yes, 4-time winner Germany is out. And on penalties, I was wondering, Graham, if Germany might be the New England. In New England, no less, with that penalty.
What, bad?
Yeah, just not good at penalties. This is their first ever World Cup penalty loss in 5 attempts. And I think it's a joint earliest exit as well.
Yeah.
Biggest shock of the tournament so far. Paraguay ranked 31 places below Die Mannschaft. Paraguay's president declared a national holiday today as we record. So the Germans are going to be nice and free to celebrate that as well, which is nice.
In Paraguay. That'd be quite a choice from them.
They're not doing anything else.
Yeah, their first ever penalty shootout loss at a World Cup. Here's one that blew my mind, and it's sort of a broader statistic, but I have to mention it on the show. So Italy won the World Cup in 2006, Spain won it in 2010, Germany won it in 2014. Since winning the tournament, between those three teams, they have won a grand total of 0 knockout games at the World Cup. So whoever wins it this year, enjoy your glory. You're not going to win another World Cup knockout game for the next decade if this recent trend is to continue. And for me, this was the first real shock of, I guess we've had shock results, but in terms of like a team going out, like I know Uruguay were one of the biggest casualties of the knockout round, of the group stage, I don't think anyone's really knew how good they were coming into this tournament. This is the first proper shock. Because I'll be honest, I hadn't really considered that Germany might lose this. I know the German media saw this coming. I personally thought they had been overly harsh through the group stage, but I guess they were right because this was pretty dismal by Germany, and I would argue that they were robbed in the sense that I cannot get on board with the disallowed tag goal, but their performance was so underwhelming, and that's now another poor performance at a World Cup by Germany. And I think they're going to have a pretty severe post-mortem after this, where it's not just about, there's going to be questions about Nagelsmann, and I've seen Jurgen Klopp has been asked about this job already. It feels like there's a greater overhaul needs to happen of German football. I don't know what that is, but yeah, they're in a bit of a crisis right now.
Hey, they got out of the group this time. That's progress, no?
Yay!
It's true.
Into a round that didn't exist in previous World Cups.
We don't need to talk about that. The real problem for Germany, I think, came in the third minute when Gustavo Gomez went down and was already bleeding. And as we've learned from games in this tournament, when Gustavo Gomez activates full warrior mode, you're in trouble. And I think for him to be in full warrior mode from the third minute told me that this was going to be a tough game for Germany. Also loved that he very calmly dispatched his penalty in the shootout. And I thought this was the Paraguay game that we expected against the United States. I thought it was the Paraguay that we expected after World Cup qualifying with how strong they were defensively. I truly think maybe they thought they could be a little bit more open against the U.S., or maybe they thought they would have more opportunities, and then the early own goal kind of changes the entire game. But in this one, it's what we thought they were going to be. Just so strong defensively, so hardworking, but then still with moments of flair and creativity, and Ciso up top, doesn't have a ton of impact until his goal, but it's a really well-taken goal. Miguel Almiron, I thought, finally doesn't get a red card and doesn't get booked for diving, but does have a Miguel Almiron performance for as long as he could, given his slightly advanced age, but the fact that he was, I think, the player tasked with finding a way to kind of carry the ball forward and make something happen. I thought he did a really good job of drawing fouls, of causing problems, and of alleviating pressure for good chunks of, at the very least, the first half. But I think as the game went on, and as long as he was involved, I thought he did it throughout. And I thought Germany, for their part, just once again looked like they didn't have a ton of answers and didn't look like they had a ton of different ways of breaking down this Paraguay team, and really never looked like they were on the same page. Because it would be like, there's a moment in the second half that really stood out to me when I think it's Kimmich gets on the ball and decides, like, I'm going to make something here. I'm going to make something happen. And he does. Like, he goes on a 30, 40-yard run. He gets past some Paraguayan players. He gets to around 20 yards, 25 yards from goal. He's like in the right half space, and he turns and like plays a cross into the box, and there's 0 runners, and it just goes out for a goal kick. And that was kind of, to me, representative of Germany throughout this one, where they just didn't look connected, they didn't look unified in their approach, and they didn't seem to have a lot of answers for what Paraguay were doing, and Paraguay did what they do very well.
Yeah. Joe, obviously the US beat this Paraguay team in its opening game, therefore, hence, ergo, US better than Germany.
Obviously.
But what were the differences between the Paraguay in the US game and the one we saw here, do we think?
Yeah, I think Taylor got to some of that really well, which against the U.S., it seemed like Paraguay were far more willing. They were far more willing to step their lines up a little bit. And we saw a lot of mid-block from them in that game. And the U.S. had a lot of success in running in behind and working the ball between the lines. In this game, Paraguay did not open up those spaces. They didn't open up a lot of space to run in behind. There was some, but not a lot. They didn't concede a lot of space between their lines of their 4-4-2 either. They were so in tune with a lot of the rotations and movements that Germany were putting together. Germany in this game, mostly they possessed in this 3-1-6 setup, where they had Kimmich as the third center back joining Ta and Rudiger. They had then Pavlovic, who kept being called Pavlitic on the broadcast. I don't know if that's a me problem or a broadcast problem.
Also, and Cece, that kept happening
so not
too?
a me problem. Noted.
No.
Who were the commentators?
We had Crocky Crocs on this
Oh,
one.
yeah.
So it was Pavlovic as the single six, and then Nemecha, and oftentimes it was Nathaniel Brown, who tucked in from left back to also be in the half space as opposite Nemecha. And then you had the two wingers, wide, so Sane on the right and Wirtz on the left. And then you had Undav and Havertz as the front two, and Havertz could sort of roam a lot to the right. And Paraguay matched up really well against that front six for Germany and dropped either their center mids into the back line or their wingers in a little bit deeper, or even at times a little narrower, to deal with a lot of the movements that Germany were offering. And it ended up looking like a Germany team that just didn't have a lot of answers. I thought that they offered really nothing in the first half. It was Kai Havertz continuing to drift to the right, and that, I think, left Germany without any sort of focal point through the middle, because Undav is not that player. There were a couple of nice moments early between Undav and Wirtz when they could combine on the left side, but then that sort of stopped as Paraguay got a better grasp of what they were doing. And all of a sudden, you had Germany trailing at the break when it wasn't just their attack that let them down. I mean, the marking on the second phase of that corner kick is embarrassingly bad. It's not just the marking in the box, it's also the defending outside the box that then allows the ball to be served into Enciso in the first place. It is like academy level defending in that moment. Truly, there's no communication to deal with the man serving the ball into the box. And then the marking mistakes inside the 18 happened, but I just could not get over how light the defending was there from Germany. And then you were in a hole, and climbing out of that hole was immensely difficult for this team. Yeah, they get the goal back from Havertz, and then you see some of the merit of him actually standing closer towards the goal because he finds really good spaces and takes good shots. But Paraguay defended for their lives in this game. I love the Gustavo Gomez kicking the ball straight into a prone Kai Havertz and then getting the ball back immediately afterwards. So many great, very, very much Paraguay-specific moments in this game. Germany, Kimmich said it afterwards, they deserve to be eliminated, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Graham, Paraguay did have a few missed chances that could have put them through without a shootout as well. But we should talk about the goal you referenced, the one that was ruled out for Germany, the Jonathan Tah one. Jurgen Klopp, speaking after the game, presumably while pressing cancel on all the calls from the DFB that were coming through at that time, he said, if that's a disallowed goal, then Arsenal wouldn't be English champions. They scored 60% of their goals like that, which is a fair point from Jurgen Klopp. But also, to be fair, was this not the kind of thing that was flagged by FIFA before the tournament that would be, ruled out? So the players should have known that this was coming.
So I can actually get on board with calling pretty much any contact on the goalkeeper as a foul if we decide that is the antidote to the sort of stuff that Klopp is talking about there, right? The meat wall set pieces, which is just a different sport. It's rugby. It's not soccer. And I do think we need to do something about them. So if that was the directive, if that's how we're going to clamp down on this, then fine. I don't really have much of an issue with that. I just think the refereeing in this game, we haven't seen that at any other point in this competition. It felt very inconsistent. And for me, this was VAR at its worst, where neither team was looking for it. I didn't really see any great appeals from even the Paraguayan players. Like there's sort of like a half-hearted appeal from Hill, the Paraguayan goalkeeper. But I watched that replay, like I'm talking about immediately after the goal happens, and I think it passed the gut check, right? Like you see that goal, and as soccer fans, we immediately know, oh, there could be something called back here, or there's something the VAR is going to have a look at. I don't think anyone had that sense, and it felt like a classic VAR overreach as far as I see it. Where if you look at the replays and you're forensic about it, you look at the feet, it's actually Hill who steps into Anton rather than the other way around. And there was Graham Scott, who is the athletics refereeing expert, and there was also, I actually forget who the BBC's expert is, but they were diving deep into the laws of the game, and basically the attacking player is allowed to hold their position. I think that's what Anton's doing. Like, I don't really see. I saw people on social media, people that I respect, so there's different opinions on this, but they're talking about what's the term, pick and roll, or a shield, or something from American sports. I didn't really see that. I just saw an attacking player standing their ground, and I think this goal should have stood. So while it was fun, I guess, that Germany went out, and I enjoy the narrative and the storyline, I would be feeling very, very stung if I was a German fan.
Here's where I will say that I disagree with a lot of that, because I think maybe this is the philosophical nature of VAR, and I know Joe has a lot to say about VAR, so I don't want to take up.
Sorry, yeah, I got to stop talking about this so much. My bad.
Like, where I disagree, Graham, with what you're saying is, like, I do think that, at least from some of the angles, it seems like Anton steps into the path of heel and then sort of holds his ground, but is also still moving his feet. But I think if you're moving in his direction and making that contact and then sort of being knocked over, you have engaged that contact. And I would go with, in the NBA, if you're taking a charge, you have to get in front of the person and then get your feet set and then get knocked over. If you're still moving your feet, then the foul is being called on you. Joe, do I have that right?
See?
There we go. I somewhat marginally understand certain aspects of basketball, largely because that was a central plot point of the Whoopi Goldberg movie, in which I believe she coaches the Knicks. But in this case, it does also, I think, apply that it felt to me like Anton steps in and just has a little bit of contact there with Hill, that Hill does then run into him. But I think he runs into him because Anton deliberately put himself in that spot to make that contact happen. It is still very light contact, to Graham's point, and it doesn't seem like it's like he fully bodies him or anything like that. But I can see why, if you're VAR, there's that wider angle where it does look to me like Anton steps into his path and then the contact occurs, and in that way you are deliberately obstructing, even if maybe it's like marginal, to say the least. But that's where I think that's probably coming from. Whether or not you want VAR then getting involved on that level, and to Graham's point, when there isn't a ton of protest, I think that's a different conversation. But I do understand why I think this was ruled out, and I also think that, like, at amateur level, I've seen that be ruled out for, like, nope, you stood in his way, you stepped into his path, you blocked his options. That's not allowed.
I think the gap that we're not going to bridge between our opinions, Taylor, is I just don't see a block. Like, I see, when I see him moving in, I think that's just the natural action of attacking, of players moving in for a set piece, and then when he stops, that's at the point where you'd think maybe it's a block, and I think Anton has just stopped at that point. That's when Hill runs into him. So I don't think we're going to bridge that gap. As I say,
it's his eyes for me, for what it's worth. I see him. I see him look at the goalkeeper as that ball is coming in. And to me, that's like, you're not watching the ball, you're looking at the goalkeeper and seeing what he's doing. So it's like you're not playing the ball, you're playing the man, sort of, in that moment.
As I say, like, if we decide as a sport that, like, you're basically not allowed to touch the goalkeeper from set pieces, like, I can get on board with that, but I don't think we're at that point yet. And as Klopp kind of references, how many, and different competitions, different authorities, I get that, but, like, this would stand in the Premier League, where attacking players are rugby tackling goalkeepers into the net. So it just feels like a different sport, the way it's officiated.
I think reasonable people can disagree on this. I think every reasonable person would agree that Germany still have some of their own themselves to blame for the result. Like
For
the
sure.
if you don't want to be embroiled in referee controversy,
Be
then
better.
create more chances. Like I mean, it's sort of that simple. And I think Nagelsmann earns a little bit of blame here as well. Undav starting over Musiala felt like a galaxy brain decision, to be honest. It's always easier to say in hindsight. And I talked about some of the Havertz movement that didn't really make sense to me. And this team just looked so stagnant. And that's not to discredit Paraguay, because breaking down a block is extremely difficult to do in this sport. But I don't think Germany were set up particularly well to do that, and I don't think the players executed well to do that either.
All right. Let's go to our penalty shootout correspondent, Taylor Rockwell, for a moment to talk about that. My key observation, Taylor, is that Nick Woltemade looks like the most German man alive, but did the most un-Germanic thing in not scoring his penalty.
He looks like Machine Gun Kelly. That's what he looks like. Who I think would be just as bad at taking a penalty in this shootout.
There were a few moments in both of these shootouts when I was like, that guy doesn't seem like he wants to be here, and then they ended up scoring. Woltemade and Ta, both times I wrote down
Ta's
they're going
mad.
to miss.
Taz.
They looked so, and there's that thing, like sometimes it's just that big inhale that you're doing because you want to just like, clear your mind, feel relaxed when you do it. And then there's that time when like the camera will cut to the guy doing that breath, and even the breath looks uncertain, where it's just this like, okay, like it's just like, oh no, that guy doesn't want to take this kick. And I feel like in both situations the taker overthought, and with Woltemade it's well read. With Ta, I think there's a momentary realization that 4, I believe, at least 3 German takes were like almost in the exact same spot, and they happen in fairly short order, and pretty much all their takes are to one corner or the other. It's like the left, from the shooter's perspective, corner gets 2, the right got 3 up until Ta steps up, and I think he'll basically like sort of telegraph, like, I know you're going to one corner or the other, so I'm going to cheat and make it seem like I'm going one way, then I'm going to go back the other way. And I think Ta just thought, okay, well then I got to go
Clear
high
it.
here. And exactly, and he just booted that thing as hard as he could. But it is the kind of problem with having that level of like specificity to it's either this corner or that corner. It does kind of, I think, make it so that the goalkeeper starts to get a read and starts to get a rhythm and starts to guess largely the right way. And so I think he, again, did a great job with his performance in this one. And then I thought for Paraguay, I cannot believe that they ended up winning this one. When they are up 2 and it's just like, well, that's it. This is done and dusted. There's no way back. And then they somehow endeavor to miss. It's Sanabria and Balbuena both miss. And it was like, okay, well, that's momentum turned. Germany, oh, nope, Ta skied his. And up steps Canale, and I love that it was Canale to score this one because he's not a starter for them. It is usually the aforementioned Gustavo Gomez who takes one, as I said, and then it's usually Omar Alderete, but I think he picks up a minor knock and isn't able to start this game. And so in comes Canale, who I thought had a really strong performance defensively, to give him his full name, Jose Canale, and I thought he did everything you needed him to do in deputizing for an experienced defender like Alderete, aside from scoring a headed goal, which I feel like would have counted towards my specific prediction point, but such is life. But then for him to just very calmly dispatch that penalty and send Neuer the wrong way, loved that one. And I do have one final note, like a slight level of sympathy for Manuel Neuer, because like to restate, he is retired from the German national team, comes out of retirement at Nagelsmann's beckoning, basically with a guarantee that you'll be the starter in every game in this tournament. And I think, like, fairly or unfairly, people are going to look at him as like, could he have done more? Should he have done more? I don't think that that's fair myself, because it's a shootout. It's always difficult. But I think in this situation, it was maybe the right man for the right occasion. And I love that Canale got it, but I feel bad for Neuer that he couldn't.
Just on the Ta penalty, which at no point did it look like a shot, like the way that he's shaping for that. It reminded me of, Ryan, you might remember this commercial on British TV, but there used to be a commercial with a comedian called Peter Kay, and they're in it's a team and they're in a circle and they're all juggling the ball between them, and then it goes 1, 2, 3, and then it comes to Peter Kay and he goes boom, boots it into the back garden of a house and goes, have it, and then he looks around at his teammates as if, was I not meant to do that? That was Jonathan Ta, where he clears it over the bar and is like, yes, job done. Oh, wait, no, I was meant to put that in the back of the net. One of the worst penalties I've ever seen, I think.
One of the worst since the Champions League final. Perhaps.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
For a month.
In a month, yeah. Very good. So, yeah, Germany obviously winning 2014. They've crashed out in the 3 tournaments since. They were quite poor in the decade before that World Cup win as well. It's almost as if they made some kind of Faustian pact to win in Brazil. But here we are with the German team. And I mentioned this is their first World Cup shootout failure. The only other time they failed to win a shootout in a major tournament was 1976 against Czechoslovakia, when the winning penalty was scored by Antonin Panenka, scoring a Panenka, for which the term was named.
So crazy, like serendipitous that moment that a man with that name would score that goal.
I know, nominative determinism at its finest, Taylor. That's what I would say. Very good. So Paraguay will play either France or Sweden in the last 16 in Philadelphia on Saturday. So I presume we're thinking it might be France, but we'll find out a little later on that one. Congratulations once again to Paraguay. Enjoy your national holiday for the rest of it. Excellent stuff. One more quick break when we come back. It's Brazil's win over Japan. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to World Cup Daily. Let's go to Brazil's 2-1 win over Japan. Casemiro and Martinelli leading a comeback win for Brazil in this one after Kaishu Sano gave Japan the lead. Brazil avoiding their earliest exit from a World Cup with the 95th minute winner, Joe. This one was a heartbreaker for Japan, but I suppose, Joe, no shame ultimately in going out to Brazil in a World Cup.
No, it's sort of the similar story to Morocco, Netherlands, where almost there's no real shame either side because of just how good all 4 of those teams are. Brazil, of course, the favorites coming into this game. They were the team with more expectations. They didn't look like the favorites really in the first half. I mean, I suppose they did in terms of how the game was played, in that they had a lot of the ball, but they were really poor in the first half. And I thought it was notable that really there weren't any notable moments from Brazilian players other than the Danilo mistake that hands the ball to Sano and then Sano does some magic and it's 1-0 Japan. There wasn't a lot between those two teams in the first half, but Brazil certainly were not imposing themselves on the game. There was a lot of early pressing from Japan on Brazil goal kicks, and that I think disrupted some of Brazil's rhythm. Brazil ended up playing long quite a bit, and they didn't really win a lot of second balls, or when they did, the attack just fizzled out quite quickly at that point. There were very few runs in behind from Brazil. Vinicius Jr. in the first half didn't have a lot of chances to go 1v1, and when he did dribble, he wasn't really creating a whole lot on that left side. I thought Japan's 5-4-1 block did a really nice job of keeping him quiet in the first half. And all of a sudden, you're in your first half stoppage time. Brazil are trailing 1-0. Marquinhos is gesticulating while on the ball, trying to get his teammates to move around like he wants. Like, this was not a performance that Brazil was pleased with in any way in the first 45 minutes. And a lot of that has to go to crediting Japan for just how effective and unified that they were as a team. The moment of individual brilliance from Sano, the committed defending, Maeda pressing and running in behind. And there was so much to like about what Japan brought to the table. It just happens that it's really, really, really hard to beat a team like Brazil or a team like Germany, and that's why Paraguay doing it was so notable. Brazil, I think, ultimately were deserved winners. They made some good changes in the second half, which we can talk about, but this was a rough one for Japan just in terms of the emotions of it.
Yeah, definitely so. Taylor, your thoughts on this one? It was like a really good first half performance from Japan. I just felt quite sad when with all due respect to Brazilian fans listening, I felt quite sad when Brazil got it done in the 95th minute.
Why did you feel sad?
Because I felt like Japan earned at least a chance of extra time to get it done.
I think that is a fair way to feel. I would say I think if you went into this game, as I did, sort of expecting an upset, I thought Japan would win this game because I've been really impressed by everything that they've done at this tournament and how able they are to defend, how able they are to attack, but specifically how strong they are at responding to the game state. And if they go behind, they can then be proactive in attacking. If they are leading, they can be stronger in defense and they can find a kind of hybrid approach in between the two. And so that they come out and look as strong as they do, cause as many problems for Brazil as they do, and get that goal made me feel like, okay, this is the Japan I thought we were going to see, and this is kind of the Brazil I thought we were going to see. And for Brazil to then respond in the second half and make changes, it to me was why you hire Carlo Ancelotti. It turns out he's quite good at making in-game adjustments and motivating his players to respond. But also, I see it as a really important stepping stone for this Brazil team. If they are to make a run at this tournament, I think you can look at this game as they overcame a team that probably should have beaten them on the day, and they found a way to do it without necessarily their best players just fully elevating. Because for large stretches of this game, it felt like the entire Brazil game plan was just get it to Vinicius and he'll do something. And that does kind of historically work, but that they're able to find other players who can contribute, other ways of attacking, and really do end up controlling large stretches of the second half, I think is a testament to Brazil. As strange as it says to be coming out of this one, praising Brazil for a narrow win and not sort of praising their vanquished opponents who had a very good game.
And just on those changes, the alterations that Ancelotti made at half-time, it was Endrick who came on for Paqueta, which felt like a bit of a gamble. And at the time, that was not the change that I expected. And I couldn't really envisage how that would improve things, but it did. And basically,
sorry, just to drill into that, gamble down a goal in a win or you're out situation?
Well, because I should clarify why, that's a good question to ask, Joe. The midfield, I thought, had been the biggest issue, where Casemiro's running through Treacle again, and so I thought the obvious change was to put on another midfielder to add another body in there and just to prevent them from being run through like they were for the first goal, for the Japanese goal, where Casemiro's just chasing shadows as soon as that ball is turned over in the centre. So the obvious change to me was not another attacker. So the fact that Endrick comes on was surprising to me, but it worked. And what it did was it pushed Vinicius and Ryan further wide, made it more difficult for Japan to press them. It also created more space to get crosses into the box, which is where Casemiro scores the equaliser. It's amazing how he's become like one of the best headers of the ball these last few years. I didn't see that coming. And it also got Vinicius into more space in general, which helped him isolate his man, because Japan were doing a really good job in the first half of not being forced into those situations. And there were a couple times when he just completely skins someone down that left side. There's one where he nutmegs a Japanese player as he's taking his first touch to control it. It's one of the most ridiculous pieces of skill I've ever seen. And then the introduction of Martinelli was interesting as well, because people who listen to this show will know I'm not his biggest fan. But what Ancelotti did was, obviously he, for club and usually country, is more of a wide player, more of a winger. He was playing inside, and he was picking up those half spaces that the halftime changes had created, and that's where the winning goal comes from, where Bruno Guimaraes feeds him the ball, he takes a good touch and gets the finish away. So I know we like to think of Ancelotti as a vibesman, and that's certainly part of his appeal, and I do see a lot of similarities between this Brazil team and some of his best Madrid teams, where there's like an unspoken confidence that they'll work out in the end. But he legitimately turned this game around with some of his changes, and I think we should give him his flowers.
And not just the personnel changes there, Graham, but also some of the movements that Brazil started to pick up on. We saw a lot more aerial service into the box in the second half, and I think part of that is because of the personnel, but also I think Brazil had a chance to actually figure out how Japan were troubling them. And a lot of what Japan were doing in this game, they're sitting in that 5-4-1 block after they'd gone and pressed high and forced some long balls, then they would go and retreat quite deep in their half. And they had they were marking such that they were constantly keeping Casemiro under wraps. Casemiro is the deepest midfielder for this team. Ueda often would mark Casemiro, and then really the center backs were free. So Gabriel and Marquinhos could go and step forward and influence the game. We didn't see a lot of that in the first half. But in the second half, it is particularly Gabriel playing a lot of balls into the 18 because he had so much space to stride forward, and he can serve the ball in. And he has, of course, the assist to Casemiro. That's not a coincidence. In the second half, there was a clear plan from Brazil to say, hey, we are going to be a little bit more direct, but not hopeful so much. We have a clear intention of how we're going to move the ball into a space where we can create a dangerous cross from. Brazil started doing that more, and it's a very un-Brazil way to do things as far as the stereotype of Brazil. But I think it does fit the personnel that they had in this team, and more importantly, it fit what they needed in this specific game.
It's a pragmatic but proactive change, and I think sometimes Brazilian managers can be tagged as being overly pragmatic. Dunga in his 14 different stints as Brazil manager would be that. But then sometimes it can be let's just put on more flair players and see if we can find a way through. And I think Graham and Joe have done a good job of outlining the changes and the tactics. I would just add a few things in there. To what Joe's already said, Japan had that 5-4-1, but it's the way that the 4 and the 1 can come together to make that pentagram shape, that they have so many numbers through the middle, but they can pop out to deal with Casemiro like Joe talked about, but they can still kind of block all the way in the front of the goal, all the way up, so that it's impossible to play through because they always have numbers. And I think it's a credit to Ancelotti then that he had Paqueta defending on the left when Brazil would defend. It was kind of like a 4-2-3-1 that became a 4-4-2, but it was Paqueta who would kind of shift out wide to defend there. And I think does pick up a knock. He's limping off at halftime. But I like that Ancelotti was basically I'm just going to put an out-and-out wide player there, and I'm going to try to kind of stretch this pitch and make it as wide as I can. And then we're going with crosses in the box. We're not going to play through that midfield 5. And there's no point in trying. That's what they want us to do. And it felt like they went from kind of hopeful crosses because we don't really have any other options in the first half to deliberate crosses to make Japan uncertain. And I think you could see it in the way this game played out that largely worked. And so again, it's Ancelotti making smart changes in terms of substitutions, smart changes in terms of tactics, but then still ultimately organizing his defense as he did and then trusting his attack to make something happen. And that's exactly how that went down.
Taylor, did you want to challenge my assertion that this is one of the least entertaining Brazil sides of all time? I get in this game there were moments like Graham mentioned that bit of skill and like there was a few good flash points. They had a lot of possession here. I just felt like for long periods of this game they weren't impressive, and I feel like by contrast to previous Brazil teams where it's marauding fullbacks, where it's lots of take-ons, where there's just a joie de vivre that this team simply doesn't have. It just feels a bit more workman. I'll tell you what it's like, Taylor. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Step Brothers, but there is a moment in Step Brothers where they get proper jobs and they have their edges taken off and they're not fun and youthful and wistful anymore. And
just taking baby aspirin twice a day.
That's right. They've got nice, sensible apartments. They're going out and buying toilet tissue for themselves in Costco. I kind of feel like Brazil are a bit like that at the moment. They're a bit sanitized compared to what they were previously. And that might be some biases of my memories of Brazil, but that's how I'm feeling.
I mean, it's not bias, I don't think, but I do think that is the reality. Is like if you are of a certain age, you remember those Nike ads. You remember Brazil 94, maybe. You remember 2002 Brazil, certainly. And you remember a lot of the flair players. And if you don't worry, because the camera will cut to them early and often at every Brazil game. And so you're totally right, Ryan, that there were those Brazil teams of the past that it was just like, which of their 9 attackers should they start today, all of whom have been nominated for the Ballon d'Or? And
they're all fullbacks.
And you don't have that with this Brazil team, certainly. And you do have players that... like I still am a little bit confounded by. Endrick is one who I know he's very young. We talked about this in LA, but I still can't tell if he's like really good or if he was just like a lot of hype and in Real Madrid spent a lot of money. So now the hype continues. There's Neymar in there and I still enjoy Neymar, but he is not the Neymar of old. So you're right that they don't have that star power in that way. And then I think the Rafinha injury is worth like reiterating that I think that attack of Vinicius on one side, Rafinha on the other, is very clearly what they were setting out to do, and what was the primary attacking game plan was focus on one side, and as soon as the defense kind of shifts over to deal with that, now you've got the other side with blazing speed, and you're going to have a threat either way, and you lose him, and now they have to adapt some more, and that leads me to answering your question. Like, I think my answer is like it's still like incomplete right now is my grade for Brazil, not just because they're still going in the tournament, but because I think they're still kind of finding their final form. And that's a thing that like good teams do as they go through the tournament is they kind of evolve and make little adjustments and make little changes, and then you end up being able to predict like what their 11 is going to be, where they're going to be, and what their primary and maybe secondary attacking patterns are going to be. And with Brazil, I think they're still just making tweaks and adjusting and still figuring it out. But within that, you have flair players who can elevate and make a difference, specifically Vinicius Jr. It's odd, as I said, to have like that one player for Brazil and not have a few others around him. But I still think that there is, with this Brazil team, a bit of flair in the way they are so open in their pressing, so open in their defense, committing numbers to the attack and being like, I'm sure somebody will deal with it on defense. And that is still kind of working. So I think there's a lot to like about them. I think they definitely don't have the Jogo Bonito of the old, but maybe that's why they haven't done as much at World Cups since 2002, and maybe that changes this time.
We will see. We'll get another chance to see Brazil, of course, on July 5th in New Jersey. They're going to play Ivory Coast or Norway. One quick question to finish off from the group. I'm looking
at
the
momentum. Who do you think they want out of that? If you're Brazil, who do you want out of that one? Because my guess is Ivory Coast.
Ivory Coast. They're the team without Haaland.
Exactly. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
They are that. Yeah, it might be that.
Cool. Sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
My question for the group is, I'm looking at the momentum graph for Brazil, Japan. It's very Brazil-weighted. But what does the scale mean, like the x-axis, where it goes higher and lower? Is it like they now have 1.5 momentums? I don't know what it's measured in. I can't quite understand.
I would presume it's like a expected threat or some sort of like touches in dangerous areas metric. I actually don't know. I haven't heard a single broadcaster explain it the entire tournament, which is not ideal. What I'd imagine is that it is based on expected threat or a version of it, and that metric basically is where the ball is positioned on the field, what is the team's chances of of scoring a goal, right? So not just based off of shots. Think of it as like expected goals, but not just based on a shot. So if Brazil have the ball in a lot of dangerous areas, they're going to be showing quite high on a lot of those periods. And if Japan do, then they'll be quite high.
Yeah, interesting. I'd like to know what that scale is measured in. It's just not all the very
Expected
momentum-y.
vibes. Expected vibes. There's no measure at all. It's just someone in the crowd. Woo, that was quite a dangerous moment. Yeah.
Let's put a spike here. It feels momentum-y right now. Okay, very good. Excellent stuff. That was Monday's games. We've got a big slate of games coming up as we record today as well. The aforementioned Ivory Coast and Norway. You may be listening or have seen that already. After you listen to this, we've got France, Sweden later on, and then Mexico, Ecuador. And then Wednesday's slate of games. We've got some big ones. England versus the Doc, DR Congo, Belgium, Senegal, and then the US, Bosnia at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Very much looking forward to that slate of games as well. It's all happening now, Joe. We're in the meat of it.
Vamos!
Vamos, indeed. Quick production note from me as well. I'm going to take my first day off from World Cup duties on Total Soccer Show on Wednesday. Got myself an England ticket, didn't I? My first ever England game I'm going to be going to. Can't hardly wait.
Yay.
Atlanta and your inappropriately shaped roof in your stadium. I can't wait to see it. It's going to be closed as well. Nice and air conditioned.
Squeezing you into the sphincter like the third line got snuck into the logo.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's the way I describe it. Excellent stuff.
I am nervous for Ryan Bailey. I'm not going to lie.
Uh-oh.
There have been like a few like budding trends at this tournament, and one is like teams that are expected to do a thing seem to be doing that thing, and Ryan, I feels like, tends to expect England to disappoint him. So I'm really hoping that in person they do not, but I am also really kind of happy that Ryan won't be on that show if they do.
Oh boy, yeah. I'm looking for, well, at least I'm going to get extra value out of the horrendous ticket price I paid because I'm getting 120 minutes and shootout going to sudden death, so I can't wait for that. Very
and
good.
you'll be very close to John Stones, so that'll
Being
be worth it.
in the radius of stones is something I've never experienced. I'm looking forward to that.
The
very much.
rarefied air.
Exactly. Within a stone's throw, shall we say, Graham?
There it is.
There we go.
You know the momentum graph that Ryan was just mentioning? I feel like Ryan's is just like, we're winning the World Cup, we're the worst team in the world. We're winning the World Cup, we're the worst team in the world. It's just going to be that fluctuating throughout this game.
And there's no way to measure it as well, just like the momentum graph. Excellent stuff. Taylor Rockwell, thank you very much indeed for your contributions to this and all things you do.
My pleasure, but one correction. There is a way to measure it. It's number of emails answered during the game. The more emails answered, the less Ryan has faith in England. That's how it works.
Oh, the old email index. Interestingly. Very good, very good. I'll try not to do that in Atlanta on Wednesday. Graham Ruthven, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey. Enjoy the game.
Thank you very much, Joe Lowery. Appreciate you.
Hey, thanks, Ryan.
And listener, thank you again for joining us on this one. We'll be back very shortly indeed, but for now, bye.